Good evening and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus. Oh, I'm going to really enjoy this one. So, I wanted to gather you here today to speak to you about conspiracies, worldwide conspiracies, the Illuminati, the New World Order, the cartel of the banking Jews, Zionism, Islamism and globalism, which is all separate issues, but let's get into the details of that. So here we go. I am your host, Daily Corvid. Let's get started. Let's have a little discussion about conspiracies. Now, this is a subject I know rather a lot about. I'm really very interested in these things, and I have been for some time, probably 25 years now. So the first thing you need to keep in mind is there are only two sides that all the conspiracies cover. And actually, these are the same two sides we see in today's Middle Eastern conflict. On one side, you have the free world. You have the Western powers, Christianity, Judaism, atheism, agnosticism, free people who believe generally in a democracy, that people have individual freedom, God-given autonomy to make their own decisions in life. And those people want to live in a society which is not bound just by their rules, but will allow their rules to apply in their life. For instance, I believe as a Christian that everyone should try to be Christian. I would love it if everyone was a Christian. But I believe that if you are not a Christian, so long as your views don't lead to violence, you can live next door to me and I will treat you like anybody else. That's the side on the right, the right-hand side. Then on the left-hand side, you have the globalists, better known as the Islamists. Now, people are often tricked by the Islamist or the globalist propaganda to conflate these two issues together. And that generates all these different conspiracy theories. So we have the Jewish banking conspiracy, we have the one world government conspiracy, we have all these other conspiracy theories. And those conspiracy theories will postulate that every single crime and evil upon the world is actually the fault of central bankers. But what they mean when they say central bankers is Zionists, because they say the central bankers are rich Jews. Now, if you think about it, there are rich Jews in the world and there are non-rich Jews who are also central bankers. So we know central bankers does not actually, in fact, mean Zionists or Jews. We also have some rich Jews who are bankers, and some of those are actually on the side of the globalists. So it's not just as simple as to say all the conspiracies in the world are down to the central bankers and that all the central bankers are in fact evil rich Jews. And the thing you've got to keep in mind is the reason why this propaganda comes about is because people on the globalist side know most of the time most people get their information from the internet. They don't actually study these things. They don't know the ins and outs of it. And then they will use what's called a keyword or a buzzword. They will say central bankers to make you think evil banker guys with big bent noses and an Israeli flag on them. So they're building that propaganda view in your head so that when somebody says to you, evil central bankers cause debt problems and war in the world, you don't necessarily know, but the image in your head you are now painting is of evil rich Jews who are doing all these crimes. But the bit they don't say, the unsaid piece, if you like, that they are expecting that you'll take on, is that central bankers are the same people as Zionists and that Zionists are bad. But what is a Zionist exactly? Well, a Zionist is a person who believes Israel should be a country. If you're a Zionist, you believe that Israel being a country is right and that the Jews live in Israel, like we see today. Whereas if you are a globalist, you believe that Israel should not be a country and that no Jews should live there. And again, the unsaid bit is if we get rid of Israel and we get rid of all the Jews, who is going to live there and what is it going to be called? Well, the globalists and also the Islamists, which is why we know we can conflate those two groups together, they say Israel should be destroyed and all the Jews and Christians should leave, and in its place there should be a caliphate centered in Jerusalem called Palestine. And that is what the Islamic states have been fighting for the last 30 to 40 years. Probably longer. That's as long as I've known they've been fighting for it. So, with that in mind, let's start to section out and separate the different conspiracies. So first of all, we have the central banking conspiracy, which says that all the banks are owned and run by secret Jews, and those Jews are Zionists. That's incorrect. We know because we can actually Google it. The banks are all run by different people. And the banks have some good people in them and some bad people in them. But the idea of banking, the idea of having a central bank, the idea of having a plastic card you can use to draw out your money, having your salary paid into your account in a central banking system, that is not the cause of war or any bad thing. We all use central banking. When you top up your mobile phone and you use your debit card, so you don't have to go to the shop, that is central banking. When you pay your internet bills and it automatically flows out of your account into someone else's account, that is central banking. The ideal of central banking, going back to the 14th century Templars, I don't think that's a bad idea. Now, you can have your own view on this. You might have your own view on this. I tend to think central banking is a useful modern amenity that we use. I like having a debit card. I like the fact that I can have a credit card. I like the fact that I can have a mortgage. I like the fact that I can pay for things online using my debit card. I can top up my phone that way. What I don't like, however, is the idea that somebody else can control me through my finances. And that is not central banking. That is called state banking, which some countries, in fact, do have, but we in the West do not use. And that is the thing that many people on my channel, it seems, are conflating with central banking. So, first, to end the central banking Jewish conspiracy thread, try to separate out in your mind what is central banking, i.e. using a debit card, having automatic bill payments, backs payments, direct debits and things, topping up your phone with your debit card, without going to the shop. That's central banking. If you use those things and you think those things without any politics attached are nice and good and you want to keep using them, then you like central banking. That's what central banking is. Central banking doesn't have any politics attached. It just means you can use a central bank to pay through to your suppliers. So you can pay through the bank to your mobile phone. You can pay through the bank to your bills. You can pay through your bank to your mortgage. And other people can deposit money in your central bank that goes back to you through your debit card and your account. That's central banking, which I like. I think it's good. State banking, which is what you're conflating central banking with, is different. State banking means it's similar to a central bank, but rather than the central bank being administrated by a third party, subject to local laws, a state bank is controlled by a government, and that means when all that central banking activity is happening, if you upset the government, they can cut your bank account off and nobody can pay you and you can pay nobody. So it's very similar to a central bank, but the difference is you are not the person that controls it, and it is not subject to local laws. It is subject to the internal doctrines of that specific government. Now, who uses a state banking model? Well, nobody in the West does. We use central banking. The countries that use a state banking model are the communist countries, the socialist Islamic countries, and the Korean states. So notice how these people who use state banking, the Islamists, the communists, and the Koreans, tend to be enemies of those who use central banking. And none of those people, Islamists, communists, or Koreans, have any Jews in their bank. So that is why they can say central banking is controlled by Jews, whereas government state banking is not. It's because they are genocidal racists. They want to wipe out Jews and therefore by proxy also Christians. They don't want you to have access to central banking unless they are in control of it. And as we see in China, Korea, Russia, the Islamic states, if you are under the thumb of the state-sponsored banking system, you cannot have free speech. You cannot have free travel. You cannot have personal sovereignty. You don't control your own life. Because if you say the wrong thing, they will cut your bank off. You will not be able to get paid. You will not be able to buy things in a shop. And your family will also be affected by this. And this will cause discrimination, persecution upon you for having caused that. So that is how they control people's minds in those states. Islamic states, communist states, Russia and China and Korea. And those states just happen to have a government-sponsored doctrine which completely goes against Christianity and also Israel and the Jews. So, in conclusion of the central banking point, communism, Islamism, Islamic socialism, and the Korean states are the enemies of free speech, democracy, and Israel through the fact that they want to control you with your economic situation. And the way they will do that is by forcing you to use a specific bank, which they will choose, the state bank, like they do in those countries. And you will not be able to have different banks which you choose. That's the difference between the two. So if you applied for a bank account and you got one and you chose the bank, you know, if it's Barclays, Lloyds, Scottish Bank, Halifax, Nationwide, ClickBank, any of these Western banks who are administrated in law and not owned by the state, that is central banking. If you have central banking, it means you are free of political control. It means no matter who you vote for, no matter what Facebook posts you make or whatever you say when you're stood on a soapbox in Speaker's Corner, whatever your view is, you're allowed to have that view, even if people don't like it, and your bank will not be affected. Nobody's going to take your debit card away or cancel your bank account as a result of you saying those things and having those views. You've got free speech. Whereas if you are under a state-sponsored bank, state banking, you can only say the things your government agree with. Otherwise, they will block your debit card and your direct debits. You will have no money, you will have no access to money, and you will not be able to use public transport or anything that requires you to have a plastic card, because it's all linked through that state-sponsored bank, and they want to make sure you comply with them. So they have the free speech, not you. But there are many other conspiracies, I'm going to go through a few now because I quite enjoy them, which can be rolled up into that sleeve, which are actually separate. So we have the Flat Earth conspiracy, which is where flat earthers believe that NASA is part of this central banking conspiracy. They're an arm of the central banking conspiracy controlled by the Zionist Jews. And the reason they do that is to convince you that the world is not actually a flat plate, that it is a sphere, and that space is real. And they say the reason you are being convinced of this is because a sphere earth is actually satanic and a flat earth is biblical. Although I disagree with this, and we see from reading Genesis, I've made a video of it in the past, I'll link it in the description. The way that Genesis describes the earth being created through the eyes of God, having a light that shines on it, and then the phasing of the light, so you have day, you have evening, morning, and you have night all at the same time. It's physically impossible for you to have day, morning, evening, and also nighttime at the same time, unless the light is hitting a rounded edge, and then you get morning, evening, night underneath. The nighttime's underneath where the light cannot hit, because it's like that, you know, the light's only hitting this end of it. And what you find with the Flat Earth conspiracists is they will also link the fact that NASA is funded by Jews back to saying Zionists are bad, therefore we should get rid of Israel. And there is, I don't want to say there's some truth in it because their version of it isn't truth, but there is truth to say the Israeli government does fund a lot of space exploration products, including NASA, and they have done for a long time. Israel owns satellites that are in space, which NASA helped them get up there. Israel have a rocket program, which is for exploring different planets. But so do Britain, so do Saudi Arabia, so do Australia, so do most developed countries. Therefore, the only people who are going to say the NASA conspiracy is Zionists and Jews is communists, Islamists and Koreans. Again, we see the two sides, the free world, democracy, central banking, versus state-sponsored terrorism, communism and the Koreans. North Koreans, I should say. South Korea don't agree. So that's why I think the Flat Earth conspiracy sometimes can be conflated with central banking when it has nothing to do with it, through that same link of saying our side has no Jews or Christians in it, we're the good side, i.e. the globalists, and the bad side does have Jews in it, i.e. the democracy and the free world of the West. Then you have the weapons creation conspiracy, which is a little bit more difficult to explain. But the Islamists and the globalists say all the weapons in the world all come out of one manufacturer, and that manufacturer just so happens to be controlled by Zionists and coming out of Israel. They say that the United Nations is a product of Israel, despite the fact that the United Nations is very critical of Israel and actually doesn't support them at all. And it supports their enemies. So the thing to keep in mind with the weapons conspiracy is that the United Nations, they are the arbiters and administrators of virtually all the weapons that are supplied to their member countries. So who controls the United Nations? Well, it has 5 main members: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, and Russia. Now, they all have equal say as the permanent main members of the UN, but then you also have a list of, I think, might be 5, I don't know it's 10. There's 10 temporary members which cyclically change every 4 to 5 years. Currently, the temporary members all support the Islamic terrorism, and they are all Islamic countries apart from 1 or 2. And those people are currently able to get weapons to use in Israel and to set up their caliphate because of their allegiance with the UN. And that means they are now using the tool of the UN to attack Israel. And in order that you agree with this and that you don't fight them, because they need public opinion, they will spread this propaganda that actually all those weapons are coming out of Israel and they're just freedom fighters. Apart from, we can see if we look at real life and we assess real politics, that is not the case. What other conspiracies are there? There's the medical conspiracy with the jabs. All medicines are evil. Medical treatments are all evil. And this is because of Zionists doing horrible evil things. So this is another one I hear about. And actually during COVID, during the lockdowns, this was a big thing that, the Islamic propagandists really got their teeth into. So the globalists will tell you, even though they know it to be false, they will try to convince you with propaganda that all technical medical expertise and medical treatments that are new, good modern technologies for medicines, are bad, they are satanic, and the reason we know this is because they are of the Zionists, of the Jewish conspiracy. Now, the reason that gets said is because Israel is one of the leading powers in the world for creating and developing medical technologies. And yes, some people may disagree with it, but the way that the law works in Israel is when you are making medical technologies, you are not allowed to experiment on human beings. So they experiment on animals. Now, I'm not a fan of animal cruelty, but I have used medical products in the past which are tested upon animals. And the reason I know they worked and that I was happy to take them is because they had been tested in that way, and I knew them to be safe. Now, don't get me wrong, I love dogs and cats and animals just like anyone else. Birds is the animal that I love. I feed birds every single day, just wild ones. I have done for 20 years. But these guys test their medicines sometimes upon birds, sometimes on monkeys, sometimes on rats. But I don't say that that is the fault of Israel or Zion. Zionists and Israelis and Jews are not evil because they are torturing animals in order to mass produce medicines to control me. I don't look at it that way. I don't have to use those medical products. I don't have to buy them there. The NHS doesn't have to source them from that spot, but it chooses to because it is the cheapest way to get them. They are the best quality medicines, and like we went through, they have been thoroughly tested. Yes, dermatologically tested, in order that I can use them and know that I will be safe in order when I use them that I don't die. This is another thing. The propagandists of the globalists, the Islamic side of the world, will tell you all that stuff is evil and that's how we know Jews are doing it, but they will also tell you that they don't use those products. But we know this to be a lie because only rich people who are affiliated with state banking in those countries are able to use those things. And so that the people in their country don't get pissed off with them, they claim that they don't use any of these things. They claim Allah has cured their cancer, or Allah has cured their pneumonia, Allah has fixed their broken leg, Allah has redone their dentistry. And the people are so ignorant and brainwashed in those places that they believe it. But you and I know better. You and I know that if a person is cured of cancer after a 9-month stint visiting hospitals in the West, the probability is that that is the reason their cancer is now cured, and it is nothing to do with Allah. So why would they do this? Why would these people be so propaganda heavy? Why would they lie so readily and openly? When us in the West here, when we hear something like that, we immediately assume they're telling the truth. Well, it's because of the contents of this book here. In this book here, Allah, in his ideology, his Islamic doctrines, describes that if you are telling a permissible lie, which is also outlined in this book here, The Reliance of the Traveller, a permissible lie in the Islamic culture, as defined in this book here, a permissible lie means something which you are claiming is true, you believe it as a truth yourself, but you know actually is a lie. We don't have anything like this in the West, and that is why when people bring us these conspiracies and these politics, these news segments, we automatically assume honesty. Because in our culture, there is no such thing as a permissible lie. Every lie is equally bad. Some lies are worse than others, but the concept of truth is not the same thing as a lie. You cannot say this lie is a permissible truth. It would be a permissible lie, if anything. You know, a white lie is a permissible lie. We would never say that it was a truth. It is not true. But we know from these two books, in the communism and Islamism communities, the globalist sponsored community with the state banking, you know, the controlling people's free will, they do believe that. And that is the reason why all these conspiracies will lead back to Islamic propagandists, because in their head, telling us permissible lies in order to further their war against the Jews so that they can get rid of Israel and build their caliphate there. Therefore, they can say the home of God is Israel, but it's Allah, and then go on a war to get rid of all Jews and Christians across the world. They are justifying a future conflict against you and I, a future genocide of you and I. That is what they are building by doing that. And that is the true conspiracy. It is not flat earth. It is not central banking. It is not weapons or medical technologies. It is not politics. The real conspiracy, which I know to be the New World Order conspiracy, that is what they're talking about there. The New World Order is communist countries, Islamist countries, North Korea, the axis of evil from the 90s. That's the New World Order. The conspiracy of the New World Order is to utilize all these tools and permissible lies to propagandize the rest of the world through media companies, through banking companies, through corporates, through education, through every possible means. That's how you know it's Islamists. In order to make sure, through any means necessary, that their side, the non-free side, the Islamists, communists and North Korea, win in an eventual world war against the free powers of the West, Christianity, Judaism, agnosticism, atheism. And that's what it comes down to. So they will deny this, of course. And they will complain about this and say, oh, he's an evil Jew, he's an evil Zionist, he's got horrible flags on his wall, America, Britain and Israel, evil flags. But just keep in mind, when you delve deeper into the actual study and the details of these things, what I'm telling you now is exactly what you will find. And the only reason this goes on, the only reason this hasn't been ended now, unfortunately, is because unlike these evil doctrines, our doctrine in here is to not preemptively murder everyone who disagrees with you, your enemies, is to give them a fair opportunity to repent for their sins, change their minds, forgive you of anything that you have done to them so that you can forgive them of anything they have done. And it's in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive their trespasses that they do against you, as you expect to be forgiven of your trespasses yourself. Therefore, forgiveness, peace can be achieved, and we can all live together amicably. Not happily, sometimes it won't be happy, but peacefully. So that's the summary of this video. If you believe in a peaceful world where there can be true diversity, not just political diversity, but individuals having their own unique sovereignty, their own diversity. I can be different to you, you can be different to Fred can be different to Joan. If that is what you believe in, then you don't believe in these. you don't believe in permissible lies, you don't believe in Islamism or globalism, and you certainly don't believe in state-sponsored economic control. What you believe in is a system based on this. You don't necessarily have to be a Christian or a Jew, but you believe in personal sovereignty, forgiveness and peace, and living next door to people who aren't the same as you without having any violence happening. That is what you believe if your culture is based on this Western, free, democratic culture. So, 25 minutes in, I think we have nicely summarised the conspiracies, how that splits off into groups of Jews and non-Jews. Obviously, non-Jews includes everyone who's not a Jew, so that means you and I, because we don't live in Israel, that's us. And Zionists, when people say Zionists, they are specifically saying people who live in Israel, who believe that Israel should be their home, as well as guys like me who support from another country, Israel being its own country, and Jews having the ability to live there. Now, it's just a shame that these guys cannot coexist because they want to kill us all. If they didn't want to kill us all, I'd say we could coexist with them. I did used to say that in the 90s. Back in the 90s, I used to say, oh yeah, diversity, everyone's equal. Everyone needs to live next door to each other and just not have a war. It'd be fine. But we know from reading these two books here, the people who believe these two books want these guys dead, including you and I if we believe Christianity. So that's the summary. Do not be fooled by thinking that globalists and Islamists include the central banking people, the medical technology people, the space people. These are all Western powers based off of a system that came from this book. And that is why the systems that came out of these books will use permissible lies, propaganda and lies to deceive you into believing in this. Not because it's in your interest or because you will survive the finality of it, you will not. They want you dead, and me. It's so that they can get to the end of their war and see a victory through any means necessary. It's the opposite of our book, our culture. And hopefully, if you have listened and learned about this, you will recognise they require your support in order to win their war against a free world. They can't do it without your public support because there's not enough of them, and they don't have that technological prowess, they don't have that financial power, they don't have the military backing, they don't have popular support enough to get away with their constant terrorism. That's the only reason they're not winning. So, in conclusion, do not support terrorism, globalism, Islamism, communism, Islamic socialism. These things are the enemy of freedom, the enemy of democracy. But on the same hand as that, don't think that the Western powers and the tools they make available to you, space exploration, medical technology, protection from an armed military and central banking, are in any way bad for you, just because these guys would like you to believe it, so it's not, it's propaganda. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. And if this interests you, which I can guarantee it probably does if you got this far, I have many videos covering various bits of this topic in the past, so look out for those on the channel. In the meantime, that's all for now, so I will say good night to you all, God bless you all, and I'll see you lovely people in the next one. Bye!